Hello, and welcome to Indy Politics One-on-One. It is the show where we go beyond the headlines and sound bites and bring you Indiana's newsmakers in their entirety. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, the editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. Today on Indy Politics One-on-One, the races in Virginia and New Jersey were good news for Democrats, but what does that mean for here in the state of Indiana, particularly with next year's elections? And also, Governor Eric Holcomb, it's his first year on the job, and so we'll talk to our panel today about what exactly that means. And speaking of panel, our panelists today are Republican Robert Vane of Veteran Strategies, Libertarian attorney Mark Rutherford, and Democratic strategist Mike Leppert. So, gentlemen, thank you all very much for being with us today. Always good to have you here.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you. All right. So, Robert, we'll start with you. Last night we had the Virginia elections. A lot of people say it was a referendum on Donald Trump. The Virginia governor won. They won their state legislature. Looks like Democrats will take it over. People say that could forecast maybe a shadow of what might happen here in Indiana with Joe Donnelly and the Republicans and Democrats next year. Last night in Virginia have any impact on Indiana?
Well, I would have the full confidence that if Luke Messer, current congressman, and my client, full disclosure, is the nominee, Joe Donnelly's in big trouble, and New Jersey and Virginia have nothing to do with it. Virginia was won by Hillary Clinton. It was the only southern state won by Hillary Clinton. A Republican has not been elected statewide in Virginia since 2009. Clearly, Gillespie ran an energetic race, but as Rick Sutton, a friend of all of us, I believe, posted on Facebook today earlier, it's an urban area victory for him, and all credit to the winner, to the doc for winning. But the rural areas in Virginia were not to the Democrats' favor, and if that plays out here in Indiana next year, that's big trouble for Democrats all the way around.
Well, let's jump over to you, my good friend Mike Leppert, Democratic strategist, author. Does Virginia and New Jersey have any bearing on here in Indiana, particularly next year?
Well, I think it answers the question.
Needs to lean a little bit closer to the mic.
I think it answers the question as to whether or not people will show up to vote against the Trump agenda. I don't think there's much debate about whether or not that's what happened yesterday. There were people that did good exit polling in Virginia yesterday that showed 2-1. People were showing up to vote against Trump as compared to those who were voting to support the Trump agenda. I think that there was a lot of discussion earlier in the week before the election as to whether or not that would hold, whether or not that was real, and a lot of debate about what the approval ratings and maybe more importantly the disapproval ratings mean out of Washington in these down ballot races. And again, it's a statewide race, and Robert's right with his statistics there in Virginia. What's happened there historically, I think, in my opinion, what happened down ballot was a bigger deal than the governor's race. So he won by 9 points, which is a big win. Not just big because it sounds good to us, but because he wasn't polling that high. They thought it was going to be a coin toss, and it was certainly not that. But the legislative race races and control that you mentioned earlier is a far bigger deal. We have a first African American mayor in Montana.
That ought to tell you something. A brother get elected in Montana.
Yeah, this was
there's something going on.
That's right. This is a
I
wave.
thought we were all brothers.
Yeah, that's a big deal. A transgender candidate beat the author of the bathroom bill. They were in a long-time conservative legislative district there, and so. You asked the question, I think, earlier in the week, do Democrats have anything going for them except they're not Trump? Yesterday, that was probably enough. The party needs to get together and improve its unity and improve its messaging. But yesterday, just being not the party of Trump was enough.
Let me get you in, Mark Rutherford.
Yes.
Like I said, libertarians, a lot of people say they were, did like Donald Trump, but weren't necessarily crazy about the Democrats. But this is a case where, once again, the Democrats kind of swept through. And does this mean anything for Indiana next year?
Well, it may. And for the Democrats and Republicans especially, they need to look at is what I've looked at this morning, and that is the 2013 turnout to the 2017 turnout in Virginia. And in the counties that Trump won in the presidential race, the turnout was 14% higher. But here's the most significant thing that I saw was that the turnout in the counties that Clinton won, 18%. So this race had a lot of people coming out. And what it shows to me is that if you have a better Democratic candidate, you can argue about that, but I think they had a better candidate that brought people out in the governor's race for the Democrats, that it's going to be tough. So Trump people were coming out, but they weren't coming out in the same numbers as the as the people who voted for Clinton in 2016 and voted for the Northam this time. So I think that's very, very significant, is that people are interested and they're coming out. Our numbers of Libertarian, we tend to run 2 or 3% in Virginia. We usually run a really good candidate, but we're looking to get wins elsewhere. But it was down to about 1.5%, which tells me everybody was looking to be excited and they hate Trump, or they hate the Democrat, or they like the Democrat, or they like Trump. But if the Democrats bring out more people, they're going to win.
So if you're a Republican in Indiana, Robert Vane, and you're looking at what happened yesterday, like I said, we can argue that Virginia's been a Democratic state, at least statewide, forever. But those really down the ballot races, where it really comes to a generic D versus generic R, and we see a situation, like Mike said, where the transgender candidate beats, the social conservative candidate, where the African American, a state just 50 years ago was still, the basis for, interracial marriage being illegal. Do you worry, or are you concerned? Do you run from Trump? Do you run away from Trump, or do you just run your own race and just hope for whatever?
Well, to Michael's point, I'll take a turnout election in 2018. I'll take an election outcome based on turnout in Indiana in 2018, on both parties getting their voters to the polls. If that's the measure for failure or success, I'll put my money on that right now. The lead from yesterday is Democrats won statewide races in Democrat states. And to say a victory is a victory is a victory, right? To paraphrase Gertrude Stein. So they won, and that's all well and good. But the reason in 2009 that Chris Christie shot to prominence was because a Republican won in a Democrat state a year after Barack Obama won. So if a Democrat had won Alabama yesterday, governor, or Georgia, or Montana won statewide, now that's a whole different set of circumstances. So if I'm the statewide candidates for the Republican next year and someone says, whoever gets their voters to the polls will win, and I'm in Indiana, then I take that all day long.
So is Robert have a point, though, Michael? Guess what? The last 4 special elections, guess what? They were all for Republican congressional seats. Republicans won. Shocked. I'm surprised to find gambling going on here. New Jersey and Virginia, although Virginia may be a little bit more purple, they are still, states that Democrats had won before. So guess what? Democrats won. I'm shocked to find gambling going on here. You're winning, sir.
I'm shocked to find myself winning. No, I actually, to expand on what Robert was saying, I've been saying this to Democrats and people in the business for a long time, that if I were Tom Perez and I was trying to rally my troops for next year, my platform would start with 4 letters: vote. And every time the turnout across the board is higher, Democrats do better. And I think that applies in Indiana. I think it applies in Montana, and I think it applied yesterday. When that historic numbers, Indiana's turnout last year was not good. It was right at the number. If that 60% or that 58% that we had last year was 63%, outcomes would change. And if you can bump that 5 points in a state, it goes well for Democrats, and I think that applies here in Indiana as well.
Is it just classic Mark Rutherford? As much as we talk about Trump and all the Trump effect, that it's just old-fashioned, get out your people and get them to show up?
Oh, yeah, that's what we try to do. That's what we're learning. We're learning our basis and trying to get people to do that as libertarians. We've got a long way to go to do that, but we're getting there, and we're starting to have some success. Nationwide, we had 18 people at least at last count elected to local offices, which is where we do better because people get to know us and know that we're fine and we've got good ideas, and they're more comfortable because they know the person personally, usually the candidates, or at least know people who know the candidate personally. But it's get out the vote. That's what it really boils down to. And if you study politics, and we all 4 here do, I think that's one of the biggest things. Sometimes people think cute commercials will do it. Well, no, you might get some marginal benefit from it, but it's basically who's best organized and who gets their people out there.
And how many true swing states are there? You have states like Missouri and New Mexico. Those are the places where you can see. And Mike, please tell me I'm wrong, but that would seem to be the places where you could say, well, it's unpredictable on a statewide level. It comes down to turnout. It comes out to the machine and the candidate in particular maybe issues. I just don't know that Alabama in a Senate race is the right measuring point any more than New Jersey in a governor's race is is a valid measuring stick. Let's find some races where, maybe Trump won the district, but Hillary won the state, or vice versa, or there's some sort of governor-senate play. Then you can start building a pattern on which to make real analysis. But
well, actually, I've got one for you. I'll just let our audience remind you, you're watching Indy Politics 101 here at Edge Media Studios at 13th and Pennsylvania, downtown Indianapolis. Talk about the state of politics. Our guests today are Republican Robert Vane, Libertarian Mark Rutherford, and Democrat Mike Leppert. Robert, you just talked about, give you a state where things may be a little bit more even competitive. Looking at recent polling data, I wrote for a column that I wrote called Looking for the Lugar Republicans, talking about the U.S. Senate race. And both polls done by Luke Messer and Todd Rokita, the two quote-unquote front runners in the Senate race, they both had 40 to 50% of Republicans undecided right now. Another poll done by a very reputable firm, 600 likely voters, had 60% of Republicans undecided. Take that in fact that Joe Donnelly is anywhere from that 40 to 53% approval rating. Does this mean that Indiana may be that bellwether for next year that everybody's been talking about?
I hope so. There's, as I should say, Luke Messer I do some messaging consulting for Luke, and I think he's got a terrific message, not only on issues like mental health care and reforming the Senate and tax reform, but I know plenty of Lugar Republicans who voted for Trump, including myself, who worked for a Lugar super PAC in 2012 and voted for Trump. And so I don't know, there may be some disconnect there. However, I believe that it's pretty simple. If Trump can get the stuff done that he wants to get done, people who are skeptical will be less skeptical, and it depends on the alternative. There are a lot of Republicans I know who voted for Richard Lugar, who voted for Donald Trump, and they don't seem to be bothered by a lot of what he says. And that's a good thing because it means there's a better chance for unity in 2020 if he runs for a second term.
Can Michael Leppert, Joe Donnelly count on those Lugar Republicans to come out and vote for him over, say, Luke Messer or Todd Rokita, or for that matter, somebody who just bought $300,000 worth of advertising yesterday,
right.
Mike Braun.
Right. Actually, I think that the situation with the campaigns that we're seeing, the early campaigns with Congressman Messer and Rokita, they're all in with President Trump. And there's nuanced messaging, and Robert's good at what he does. But if you're going to throw all of your eggs in the Trump basket, yesterday is a warning shot. I don't think that even in Indiana, that the strength that he had on Election Day 12 months ago is the same now. That base has eroded. That enthusiasm has eroded for his agenda. He has not been successful in his first year. And Robert's right. He needs to have some successes, and he needs to have them fast. B, there are a lot of people, and they are Lugar Republicans, who are turned off by the way he governs, not just about the results and the policies, but the way he governs and the way he approaches the job. And over time, that is exhausting people. And I believe it's a real risk to throw in with him, all guns blazing. And I think 12 months from now, that number is going to actually be worse, not better.
Mark, where did the Lugar Republicans go? Or for that matter, independent-minded libertarians, independents?
Yeah, well, the libertarians vote for the libertarian, whoever that be. And I'm amazed how our straight-ticket voting is growing. I mean, it's amazing what it once was when I first got active and what it is now. There's a lot of people just go in and they're yellow dog libertarians. Great, we have them now. That's wonderful. But I think that people vote for symbols at the larger levels, including Senate and president. They can forgive a lot that they see that they don't like, but it's what does that symbolize? Trump's got a lot of people who went to him because they didn't like what was going on with the Democrats and they didn't like going on with some Republicans. The Lugar Republicans, I think they generally go to Trump unless they have a good reason not to. They may not like his personality and what he does and how he does it, but they're looking for change too. And I'm not meaning to say that was a brilliant thing that he glommed on. And that's who he's going to attract, and he'll still attract those people. Although you'll have some people who are very deep in thought, they'll probably just vote for the libertarian or vote for no one.
Our guests today are Republican Robert Vane, Libertarian Mark Rutherford, and then Democrat Michael Leppert. We're talking about the state of Indiana politics and where we are today in the Hoosier State. Gentlemen, as we have this conversation today from the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis, Governor Eric Holcomb just wrapping up an announcement of his 2018 legislative agenda, announcement at the start of it over at the State House, 28,000 committed jobs here in the state of Indiana. The governor continued talking about streamlining workforce development, making it easier to get Hoosiers to work in those jobs where they need to be filled, dealing with the opioid crisis, also talking about technology and innovation, government transparency. 1 year in, Mike, I want to start with you. Is Eric Holcomb on the road to re-election?
He absolutely is. He's doing everything right. There are some things that I take issue with, and normally when I see him getting outside of the lines, my lines, is when he starts supporting things that are haywire.
Freedom, truth, justice,
haywire.
equality.
Yeah, that's right.
American way.
Haywire in support of DC politics. When he's got his sleeves rolled up and he's doing the work of Indiana, he's been awfully good. It's hard to take issue with much that he's done. There's a new energy in the office. He surrounded himself with good, competent people. There's not a lot to complain about, and I think the Democrats in general are watching him in action and thinking, wow, this is going to be a big task in 2020 if we're going to try and take him out, because and the question is whether or not you should, because he's doing a good job.
So,
I have nothing to add.
so if you're talking to...
yeah, you can pay me later.
You fed me on Sunday. This is the way I can pay you back.
That's right.
So if you're talking to someone like John Zodi, who's the chairman of the Indiana Democratic Party, or perhaps some of the people here locally, you tell them, hey, good luck finding a candidate?
Well, the Democrats are paying the price for the Bauer years, in a sense that we've never done it that way before, and the mindless. I guess from a partisan perspective, you have to assume that some of it's going to happen. But since Jim Kittle took over as state chair in 2002, I believe the Democrats have won 3 statewide races, Donnelly, By, and Ritz, I think, and Barack Obama carried the state in 2008. So their message, the Democrats' message nationwide, is basically kneeling and squealing. Kneeling during the national anthem and squealing about Trump. So that's not going to work.
Oh, my goodness.
And that's not going to work in Indiana. And to Mike's point, Eric has navigated today's political climate in a way that would be frightening if I was in charge of finding a Democrat candidate. He had several advantages. One, he worked for Mitch Daniels. 2, he was state chairman, which means the political role came natural to him, and he was state director for Senator Coates. So I would imagine that the combination of having been a staffer in the office, high-level staffer, which I can't remember the last staffer who was elected governor, I imagine it's generations, and having traveled the state multiple times in 2004, 2008, all those years when he was chairman for Senator Coates, he's got his finger on the pulse of Hoosiers probably as well as anyone possibly could have, and I'm sure that's one of the reasons why he's doing so darn well.
And I need to break in here. I believe that had John Gregg won, we would still have a lot of opportunity and energy in that office that's new, and things would be better than they were. I said it over and over last year that we were going to get a better governor, and we got one, and we were going to get one either way.
Do we have a better governor, Mark Rutherford?
Yes, well, we definitely do. Yeah, Holcomb's done everything right. He's a textbook example of how he's become governor and how he's done it so that people see his good qualities, that he's organized, that he works with people well. I talk to Democrats, I talk to Republicans, I talk to Libertarians, and they all go, he's doing fine or better. That takes a lot of skill, a lot of listening to Hoosier voters. So that's going to be hard for the Democrats or Libertarians to have anybody who can really put a challenge to him. I think Libertarians, I'm pushing to run locally. That's where we really can do the best job. And the Governor Holcomb, he's there. Things could change. Election's a long time away from now, but he's doing a textbook example of how to do it well and govern well.
Well, I was jokingly say when the mayor of Gary, Indiana, throws a private fundraiser for you for the Republican governor from Indianapolis, that ought to tell you something.
Well, look during major moves, right? Who were the 2 people who were among the most vociferous and most passionate in defense and the promotion of major moves? Earling Rogers. Who was the other one? Glenn Howard. Democrats from Northwest Indiana.
Well, Glenn Howard was from here in Indianapolis.
No, I understand that, but Earlene who understood what it meant in terms of jobs, and so that's the kind of thinking that the party kind of turned away from. And I get it to a certain point, because being in opposition is by definition somewhat exhausting, and it's hard to find good candidates. But you all beat up on my former boss, Mike Pence, but I thought he did a pretty strong job as governor. His economic record is very, very good.
Wait a minute, we're running out of time, I think.
I will always,
he obviously did something right. He's the vice president of the United States.
I will always say Mike Pence is a good, close personal friend, is living proof that in politics, some days it is better to be lucky than good.
Well, we all hope we get lucky, hence our marriages, right, Mike?
Some lucky, yeah, we've been pretty lucky.
Gentlemen, we got just a couple of seconds left here. Just to go around the table real quickly, start with you, Robert. What do you think is going to be the big thing to pay attention to in 2018 as far as the state of Indiana goes?
Job creation and job training, and two things that Governor Holcomb's done very well on.
Mark?
How Holcomb handles the toll road situation. There's a lot of people who don't like it, and it comes from all different directions. But I think that's going to be a bigger issue unless it gets tamped down by Holcomb somehow.
Opioids and the recovery from an addiction problem that we've never seen before.
All right. Well, our guests today have been Republican Robert Vane, Libertarian Mark Rutherford, Democrat Mike Leppert. You've been watching Indy Politics 101 coming to you live from Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. Be sure to use them for all your wonderful video needs. These guys are really great. We always appreciate what they do for us. I'm Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, the editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org, and we'll see you next time on Indy Politics 101.